There is a seductive idea circulating in Washington right now. It is the belief that because America is big, America can be careless. It is the assumption that we can weaponize our economy, punish our allies, and tear up trade deals, and the world will have no choice but to take it. It feels like strength. It feels like leverage. But it is a hallucination. While we celebrate this new brand of toughness, the rest of the world is quietly doing something much more dangerous. They aren't submitting. They are adapting. They are building a global architecture where they simply do not need us anymore. We are mistaking isolation for independence. And by the time we realize the difference, the machinery of American power, the dollar, the alliances, the supply chains, will have been dismantled, not by our enemies, but by our own hand. We are going to walk through exactly how this happens. We are going to strip away the campaign slogans and look at the brutal arithmetic of what America loses when it governs by impulse. I am Akira Matsuda. If you are ready to trade comforting lies for strategic clarity, make the choice to subscribe and stay with me. Let's look at the map. There is a comforting lie that has settled over the American political landscape, and it is a lie that feels intuitively visceral correct to millions of people. It is the belief that because the United States is the largest economy on earth, we hold all the cards. It is the assumption that we can simply pull back from the world, demand that production return to our shores, punish anyone who disagrees with tariffs, and force the global system to bend the knee through sheer economic gravity. When you hear the rhetoric coming out of the current movement, the promise to reshore everything, to place massive levies on allies and adversaries alike, to weaponize the dollar as a blunt instrument of compliance, it sounds like strength. It sounds like a reassertion of American dominance. It feels like we are finally standing up and taking back what was stolen. And that is exactly why it is so dangerous. Because that feeling of strength is based on a memory, not a reality. To understand why this approach is a strategic suicide pact, you have to understand why it feels so seductive in the first place. We are suffering from a collective hangover from the mid-20th century. We look back at the post-World War II era, at 1950, 1955, 1960, and we remember an anomaly. We remember a moment when Europe was in ashes, Asia was rebuilding, and the United States possessed half of the world's manufacturing capacity. In that specific, fleeting historical window, we really could dictate terms. We were the only game in town. If we wanted to make something, we made it here, because there was nowhere else to make it. If we wanted to set a price, we set it, because no one else had the leverage to argue. That era is the psychological foundation of Trumpism. The entire economic philosophy is built on the premise that we can recreate the leverage of 1950 simply by demanding it. It treats the global economy as if it were a linear command and control hierarchy, where America sits at the top and issues orders. But the world did not stay frozen in 1950. While we were enjoying our dominance, the rest of the world wasn't just rebuilding, they were integrating. Today, the global economy is not a wheel with America at the hub. It is a neural network. It is a decentralized, high-velocity web of supply chains, capital flows, and specialized labor that ignores borders. This is where the comforting lie hits the concrete wall of reality. The proponents of aggressive protectionism talk about bringing jobs home, as if it were merely a matter of will. As if a CEO in Chicago simply needs to sign a paper to move a factory from Shenzhen or Vietnam back to Ohio. They ignore the physics of the modern world. They ignore that the United States currently lacks the industrial workforce, the component supply chains, and the raw infrastructure to absorb that much production overnight, or even over a decade. When you slap a blanket tariff on the world, you are not punishing foreign governments. You are not taxing China or Germany or Mexico. You are taxing the American supply chain. You are severing the arteries that keep American businesses competitive. You are taking a complex, finely tuned engine that relies on global inputs to function, and you are pouring sand into the gears in the name of leverage. And this brings us to the core misdiagnosis. The architects of this new economic nationalism believe that tariffs are a sign of confidence. They believe that by raising barriers, we are fortifying the castle. But in the modern era, walls do not create leverage. They create isolation. True power in the 21st century is not about how much you can do alone. It is about how central you are to the network. It is about being the indispensable node that everyone else must connect to. When we threaten to cut those connections, when we treat trade as a weapon rather than a utility, we are not displaying strength. We are signaling instability. We are telling the world that the United States is no longer the architect of the system, but a rogue operator within it. We are told this is a strategy. It is not a strategy. Reshoring without capacity is not a plan. It is a hallucination. It is an attempt to solve complex structural problems with blunt force trauma. And the tragedy is that the entity most likely to be broken by this force is not the foreign adversary we think we are targeting. If you pursue a policy of total economic autarky in a globalized world, you do not force the world to come to you. You force the world to build around you. You create an incentive structure where the only rational move for every other nation, friend or foe, is to insulate themselves from American chaos. The stated goal is to restore American greatness by making us independent of the world. But the reality of this approach is that we are initiating a process that does not restore our leverage. It liquidates it. We are not protecting the American economy. We are voluntarily removing it from the driver's seat of the global system, under the false belief that we can drive better with our eyes closed and our foot matted to the floor. There is a critical distinction in geopolitics that is often lost in the noise of a campaign rally or a social media feed. It is the distinction between looking powerful and actually being structurally powerful. Looking powerful is about volume. It is about threats, ultimatums, and the spectacle of dominance. But structural power is silent. Structural power is when other nations do what you want, not because they are afraid of a tweet, but because they have no other choice. For 70 years, the United States held structural power. We didn't need to threaten to burn down the house because we owned the mortgage. But what we are witnessing now is the rapid conversion of that structural leverage into cheap, transactional coercion. And the tragedy is that this conversion is not restoring our authority, it is shattering it. Look at what is happening around the globe right now. While Washington is busy announcing new tariffs and threatening trade wars, the rest of the world is not sitting idle, waiting to be punished. They are moving. They are adapting. And they are doing it in ways that do not make headlines, but do change history. We see the BRICS nations, and an expanding list of countries in the global south, accelerating their efforts to build alternative payment systems. We see regional blocs in Asia, and even the European Union, quietly diversifying their supply chains to bypass American bottlenecks. This is not just political posturing. This is structural rewiring. They are laying new fiber, building new ports, and signing new trade agreements that explicitly exclude the United States. It is crucial to understand that this is not necessarily an act of anti-American ideology. It is a rational response to American unpredictability. Put yourself in the shoes of a foreign leader or a global CEO. If the United States market is governed by the whims of executive impulse, if access to the dollar or the American consumer can be turned off like a light switch because of a perceived slight, you do not keep all your eggs in the American basket. You hedge, you insulate, you build a Plan B. For decades, the United States was the Plan A for the entire global economy. We were the bedrock. But by weaponizing trade access as a tool of daily punishment, we are forcing our partners to treat us as a liability. We are teaching the world how to live without us. This brings us to a cold economic reality. Coercion only works when the cost of compliance is lower than the cost of exit. In the past, the cost of exiting the American system was insurmountable. You couldn't survive economically if you didn't play by our rules. But the current strategy of aggressive protectionism and diplomatic volatility is raising the cost of compliance to unsustainable levels. We are making it so expensive, so risky, and so humiliating to do business with the United States that we are effectively subsidizing the creation of rival systems. We are lowering the exit cost for everyone else. And who pays the price for this transition? It is not the Chinese Communist Party. It is the American exporter. It is the American farmer. It is the American technology firm. When foreign markets pivot away from the dollar or establish trade routes that bypass our ports, those are customers who do not come back. Market share, once lost in a high-stakes geopolitical divorce, is rarely recovered. We are seeing American companies lose their footing not because their products are bad, but because their government has made them too risky to rely on. We are watching a self-inflicted wound metastasize into a strategic catastrophe. We are operating under the arrogance that the United States is the only electrical grid in town, and that we can cut the power whenever we like to force obedience. But the world is watching, and they are buying generators. We are not forcing them to submit. We are accelerating the construction of a world where the United States is just one option among many, and an increasingly unreliable one at that. It is time to strip away the personalities and the partisan noise. We need to look at this not as a matter of who sits in the Oval Office, but as a matter of how the machine of American power actually functions. We need to talk about Trumpism not as a political identity, but as a systemic operating logic, and why that logic is a liability to the nation's survival as a superpower. The fundamental error in this style of governance is the belief that chaos is a strategic asset. There is a school of thought that says if we keep our allies and adversaries guessing, if we are unpredictable, we gain the upper hand. That might work in a real estate deal. It might work in a televised negotiation. But when applied to the architecture of global alliances, it is corrosive. We are witnessing a profound decoupling of American trade policy from American diplomatic strategy. You cannot have a State Department working to build a coalition against a rival power, while simultaneously the White House is slapping punitive tariffs on the very partners you need for that coalition. This is institutional schizophrenia. It sends a clear message to the world. The right hand of America does not know, or does not care, what the left hand is doing. When executive impulse overrides bureaucratic continuity, the United States ceases to be a nation of laws and institutions in the eyes of the world. It becomes a nation of whims. Look at our alliances. Publicly, diplomats smile and shake hands, but privately, in the chancelleries of Europe and the ministries of Asia, the conversation has shifted. They are no longer asking, how can we support the American agenda? They are asking, how do we fireproof ourselves against the next American mood swing? This is the decay of credibility. Alliances are not built on affection. They are built on the reliability of commitments. Security guarantees, trade pacts, intelligence sharing. These systems run on the fuel of trust. They require the certainty that what Washington says today, Washington will stand by tomorrow. When we treat these commitments as bargaining chips, when we threaten to abandon NATO over dues payments, or tear up trade deals to score a domestic headline, we are not negotiating for a better deal. We are signaling that our word is only good until the next news cycle. The defenders of this approach will point to short-term concessions. They will say, look, we threatened a tariff and they lowered a barrier. And yes, coercion can extract a temporary price. You can hold a gun to the head of an ally and get their wallet, but you do not get their loyalty. You do not get their long-term cooperation. You convert a partner into a victim, and victims look for a way out. We are trading structural authority for transactional wins. We are burning down the cathedral to fry a steak. The danger here is not just that we are annoying our friends. It is that we are blinding ourselves. When the United States becomes a source of global volatility rather than stability, we lose our ability to lead in a crisis. When the next pandemic hits, or the next financial collapse, or the next great power conflict, who will answer the phone when Washington calls? Why would they follow a leader who has spent the last 4 years threatening their economy and mocking their security? You cannot terrorize your partners into respect. Fear is a depreciating asset. It works right up until the moment it doesn't. And once you have demonstrated that your alliance is purely transactional, that you view your friends as marks to be fleeced rather than partners to be defended, you cannot simply flip the switch back. You cannot demand loyalty from people you have spent years extorting. Even if a specific tariff works on a spreadsheet for a quarter or two, the damage to the underlying infrastructure of American power is permanent. We are proving to the world that the United States is no longer a guardian of the system it built, but a threat to it. And that is a bell you cannot unring. Let's zoom out and look at the map one last time. We need to remember who we are in this story. The United States is not a victim of the global order. We are not a passive participant. We are the architects. We wrote the code. We built the institutions, the shipping lanes, and the financial protocols that govern how the world works. And we did this for a reason, so that the world would tilt inevitably and invisibly in our favor. But now, in a fit of populist resentment, we are taking a sledgehammer to the very foundation we poured. This is the strategic tragedy of the current moment. We are not witnessing a restoration of American power. We are witnessing the liquidation of American influence. When we talk about the cost of this trajectory, we have to stop looking at the stock market ticker and start looking at the horizon. The real cost is the loss of rule-setting authority. For 3 generations, if there was a dispute in global trade, it was settled in courts and committees designed by Americans. If there was a security crisis, the response was coordinated through hubs in Washington. That is what leadership looks like. It isn't about winning every single transaction. It is about owning the casino. But by embracing a philosophy of naked economic nationalism, we are abdicating that chair. We are telling the world that we are no longer interested in maintaining the system, and nature abhors a vacuum. As we recede, as we turn inward, other powers are not just stepping in. They are rewriting the rules to exclude us. We are moving toward a world of fragmented blocks, a Chinese sphere, a European sphere, a non-aligned sphere, where the United States is just another large regional power shouting from across the ocean, but no longer sitting at the head of the table. This leads to a frightening narrowing of our future. Strategic flexibility is the ability to choose your battles. It is the ability to pick up the phone and mobilize a coalition to sanction an aggressor or secure a supply chain. But that ability depends entirely on a reserve of political capital that we are currently burning at a terrifying rate. We have to understand that credibility is an asymmetrical resource. It takes decades to accumulate, compounding year over year through consistency and reliability. But it can be incinerated in moments. The damage we are doing right now will not vanish the moment a new administration takes the oath of office. You cannot simply walk back into the room, apologize for the last 4 years of chaos, and expect the world to snap back to attention. Trust, once broken, leaves a scar. The hesitation remains. The hedging continues. Future American presidents will wake up to find their menu of options has shrunk. They will reach for levers of power that used to work, only to find they have been disconnected. They will issue warnings that are ignored and make promises that are doubted. This is the cold reality we must confront. This path does not lead to a stronger America. It leads to a lonely America. It leads to a rigid, brittle nation that has traded its structural dominance for a false sense of control. The damage is already in motion. The fractures are visible. And reversing this slide will not be achieved by shouting louder or threatening more. It will require a generation of disciplined, sober, institutional repair to convince the world that the United States is once again safe to rely on. That is the hard work ahead. Everything else is just noise.